Turning now to the latest terror threats we're confronting here at home, accused homegrown terrorist Christopher Lee Cornell now being held without bond today. You may recall that the FBI says he hoped to wage jihad by attacking the Capitol with pipe bombs and shooting government employees and officials there. 20-year-old Cornell reportedly was set to make good on his threat at the time of his arrest. He was nabbed after allegedly buying a pair of semi-automatic weapons along with hundreds of rounds of ammunition.
The threat of the so-called lone wolf, the independent actor who could be lurking right here within the homeland and who could strike on little or no notice, a new phase in the terrorist global threat to which we must respond.
That from Homeland Security Chief Jay Johnson saying we are in the midst of a rise in al-Qaeda affiliates around the globe despite a decline in the core group itself. 11 months before the 9/11 attacks, Osama bin Laden sent suicide bombers to blow up a huge hole into a U.S. Navy destroyer that had stopped to refuel at a Yemeni port. 17 sailors died and 39 others were wounded that day on the USS Cole, and forever cemented the al-Qaeda leader's ruthless place in U.S. history. The 9/11 Commission later concluding that bin Laden was so emboldened by the Cole attack, he wasted no time carrying out his deadly plots on New York and D.C. Joining us now, retired Navy Commander Kirk Lippold, who was leading the USS Cole during that attack. He's raising big concerns right now as we confront what our Homeland Security Chief calls a new era in the global terror threat. Welcome, Commander. Great to have you here.
Thank you, Uma. It's great to be on your show.
Do you think this administration has an overall strategy to deal with the escalation of terror threats against the U.S. right now?
Right now, I think they've got an approach, but they don't have a strategy. I think we're still looking at how we're going to deal with it, what we're going to do. The biggest problem that I see going on with it is that there is no overarching ability for us to engage across the board with other countries to ensure that we're sharing the kind of intelligence that we need to get what we need. The FBI is doing a phenomenal job here domestically, which is exactly their job. The CIA is trying to get the intelligence from overseas. But once again, we've gotten into this pre-9/11 mindset. We treat it as a criminal matter instead of a war that we're actually fighting against radical Islam, where we need to ensure that both of those agencies are getting, that we have the intelligence fusion we need here at home in order to safeguard American interests, not only just here at home, but Americans abroad as well.
Does it bother you that the White House will not describe the terror attacks in France as tied to radical Islam, even though the French government says it is? And recently, Canada's Prime Minister went on the record saying the international jihadist movement has declared war on Western civilization, and whether we like it or not, it's not going away. Why do you think this president downplays the link between the jihadists and radical Islam? Do you think the president feels compelled to defeat jihad at this point?
Well, honestly, Uma, I think what you're really seeing is an administration who is absolutely loath to put Islam in any title whatsoever as we fight this war against these radicals. And the bottom line is we have to call it what it is, and at some point we have to label it for what it is. We are working very diligently with a lot of our Muslim allies, especially Saudi Arabia and others, to try and get to the root causes of this thing so that we can stop the spread of the radicals that we have. Clearly the growth in ISIS that's going on. Clearly we are seeing an emboldened al-Qaeda on the Arabian Peninsula that is operating freely in Yemen. These are creating problems, and while Secretary Johnson, Jay Johnson at the Homeland Security, is worried about the lone wolf threat here at home, I think it is going to be much deeper and much broader problem than that, and we need to make sure that we're getting the kind of intelligence fusion necessary to safeguard us here at home. But I'm afraid that we are once again guarding some rice bowls, and that's not happening to the detriment of the American people.
I want to talk about Iran for a moment. The President and the Prime Minister of England are both warning Congress right now of possible military confrontations with Iran if Congress succeeds in passing new sanctions against Iran rather than giving nuke talks a chance. What's your reaction to this?
I look at it and say, Mr. President, here's the problem. As long as we continue to negotiate, we are falling behind. Every day that we negotiate with the Iranians is a day that the centrifuges are spinning. that the enrichment continues and that they are continuing to gain technical know-how into not only build a bomb, but to be able to get it into a miniaturized version, to weaponize it, put it on top of a missile that can reach not only the Middle East, but beyond into Israel and into Europe. Don't think for 1 minute that the Iranians aren't speaking with the Pakistanis, that they aren't talking with the North Koreans to gain that technology and do it. And I think Congress is finally reaching a point saying, while it may be nice to negotiate and we want to come to a peaceful resolution, at some point we need to draw that red line. Doing nothing but negotiating a table creates nothing, and we cannot afford, this nation cannot afford to have a nuclear-armed Iran.
I know you're also very concerned about the impact of releasing prisoners from Gitmo. This week we had news that 5 more detainees were released at a time when the Paris attack continues to put Europe on edge. What do you make of this latest move?
Well, I'm very concerned. I go back to when we created Guantanamo Bay, starting with the Joint Chiefs of Staff. It was designed to be an intelligence center for excellence in the war on terror. It was a place where we could breed detainees and learn about them and figure out how they conducted their operations so we could target them. The problem you have is that we no longer have a facility to bring them. We cannot afford to surge ships out of Norfolk to sit off Libya to bring captured terrorists one at a time back to the United States for trial. We're in a war and we have to find a better way to do it. When you look at what Guantanamo Bay is and what it should be, get off the human rights perspective where they're sitting there and manipulating it for their own purposes. Guantanamo Bay should be an intelligence center where we can put that intelligence together for the sake of the safety of the nation, and it's imperative that we start using it for that purpose. Releasing detainees when the recidivism rate is going up is a continuing problem for the administration and endangers American lives in the field. Additionally, at a time when we need to be using that facilities and these detainees are being released into countries that are unstable, hey, if they no longer represent a threat to the United States, then, Mr. President, why won't you tell the American people why they no longer represent a threat, how much money it's costing us to resettle them, and why you feel that there's no follow-up with any of the other intelligence agencies around the world to track these guys? If they're not a threat, we don't need to be wasting our resources doing that, and yet for every one of these detainees, that is exactly what we're doing.
Commander, it's great to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us with your insights today.
Thank you, Uma. Great to be on the show.